right, so today I'm sitting down with somebody I've gotten to know pretty well over the last few years, Councilman Josh Binda of the city of Lynnwood. I got to know you a few years ago when you're shooting some campaign promo. I was working with the organization that was helping you run your campaign at the time. And since then, we have been in touch off and on, and man, you've managed to step in something here in the last year specifically. And so I want to get into some of that today and be able to kind of get your take. First off, do you want to tell people a little bit more about yourself?
So a little bit of my background history. My family are originally immigrants from the West African country called Liberia. There's a civil war going on in our country in the late 1990s. They won an international lottery visa, was able to migrate here as refugees, basically, with nothing but the clothes in their bags. I was later on born and raised in Providence, Rhode Island. That's where I was originally born. Grew up there till about 14 years old. Was a single mom of four. Grew up in the projects. Not a lot of resources or stuff like that. We definitely had a lot of gang violence, a lot of drug dealers, and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, moved here when I was, say, about the age of 14, and been here ever since. And grew up in Lynnwood ever since. And
Great.
So now I'm here and doing the work that I'm doing.
Something else I wanted to touch on, because it's going to lead into, I think, what you think of some of the motivations are that have you in some of the situations you're in right now. Leading up to you being elected, what were you doing, the year or two previous in the protest world?
Oh, yeah. So for those who don't know, I was definitely a huge advocate and a huge, I would say, just someone that was leading the charge. One of the big leaders in the movement of the Black Lives Matter movement. I was leading protests all over Snohomish County and the state, and really advocating of why we need to have legislative change going on in communities. Why, ever since the whole situation with George Floyd happened, I think it really unlocked a lot of intermits of racism in our system and stuff like that was happening. And so I was a huge advocate for racial and social justice, and making sure that those voices being heard. But even bigger scope of that, I've always been a humanitarian. I'm an advocate for any humanistic type of fight that we're in as a community to try and better ourselves as a society. So I've been doing that type of work, and that was a huge part of what led to me even thinking, this is cool. We're getting to do this work and advocate this change, but true change comes from legislation and comes from reform. And so thinking of how it was cool to advocate for that, vocalize that, but knowing there's a bigger picture of what I want to do and create the change that I want to see. That's when I decided, I was like, you know what, I think I want to throw my name in the hat and actually run for office and actually make the difference I want to see in the community, and not just scream and protest and advocate. I want to be the change. And I think that was a big part of what I wanted to do. And through that, I was able to run a pretty grassroots campaign. Got a lot of attention across the state and across the country. I was getting donations all across the country, support all across the country through platforms like TikTok. And I was getting a lot of statewide coverage with my race because I'd be the youngest in history to do so. And I was able to beat out a former 3-time city council member in the city of Lynnwood, who's basically never lost a race. And she's more veteran seasoned than me. And you have this college student, I was a junior in college at the time, that didn't have much political experience, but had a passion and wanting to better his community, and stepped up and made that and decided to do that. And so I think that's what really led me to be here. And even before then, even before I ran for office, I was actually the chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Commission for our entire city of Lynnwood. I got elected as a chair. So I was doing a lot of this work to try and find ways to better my community even before I was elected official. That just added on to the scope of change that I could create. Sure. With a different type of system, that I was working with.
So now that we get an idea of what drives you, what type of person you are, let's get into early on, right before you win your election night. Mm-hmm. There was an article that came out specifically in the Lynnwood Times the week leading up to election night.
Yeah.
In that article, they accused you of misusing campaign funds. To do a brief summary, it wasn't a large amount. It was in the few $1,000s range.
About $2,700.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, and these are city council type, budgets. They're not massive budgets, but a few $1,000s was a significant portion of it. They had said that you were spending money on personal things that you shouldn't. How did they actually find out about that?
Man, well, first off, this whole thing with the campaign, but it's been one weird situation to even be in, because I from what my knowledge now of the PDC and stuff like this does happen frequently in our system. So to have it come to the scope was definitely interesting to see it play out. But basically, the overview, it really didn't start happening, this whole thing with the can and all that, until after I won my primary election. And after I won my primary election, I started, me and my treasurer and and first of all, I want to make this very clear. You know, as a first-time candidate, I had no idea anything about the Public Disclosure Commission, or, you know, what is campaign related, what's not campaign related, all this stuff with the PDC. It wasn't something that I was familiar with. And, you know, obviously my campaign team, for the most part, it was a very grassroots team. A lot of my volunteer were high school students. You know, all of us were starting to figure this out at the same time. And my consultant and my treasurer had more of a knowledge about that kind of stuff. But to dive into details about it, wasn't until after I won the primary that these people started coming after me with the Public Disclosure Commission. And you have people like Glenn Morgan, which I'm sure, you know, I don't know if the people know, but in the political world, he's a very renowned Republican guy that is known for giving PDC complaints out to Democratic candidates. And especially, you know, me in my race, after coming out on top of the primary, I was not surprised I was a huge target. And also the Lynnwood Times owner himself, Mario Lotmore, who there's a history with him and in terms of targeted attacks towards me personally and professionally. And, you know, I know you know some of those things I've discussed with you in the past. But it was like they didn't expect me to come on top of the primary. And once I officially did, it's like they were looking and digging for anything they could find within my campaign expenditures, within anything they could find to try and discredit the campaign that I was running.
But I want to be clear on this. When I say where did they find this, they said they did an investigation. Really, it was your own filed public disclosure statements. These were things you disclosed.
Oh yeah, no, I completely disclosed everything that we spent, anything that was spent money on, anything. I completely disclosed it. It wasn't an investigation. I gave it out to the public.
These are publicly available documents.
Publicly available. I said, look, this is what we spent money on. This is what we didn't do. And it wasn't until I sat down with my consultant and I was like, okay, like he was like, you want to make sure, let's make sure we have all the ducks in a row. And he sat me down. He said, okay, maybe this is considered something you can't spend campaign funds on. Maybe these are something you can. And so after we did that, we like kind of sat down, like went over our things to make sure that they couldn't attack us for anything. It ranged about I think 2,800 where we thought, okay, maybe these could be deemed not campaign related. I was like, okay. I didn't know. I had no idea what was considered not or what was considered is. I was like, I will just reimburse the money back. And so that's what I did.
So let's be really crystal clear on the
crystal
timeline.
Clear.
This happened before Lynnwood Times came out with their article saying that there had been campaign money. You had already identified them with your team and came up with a remedy to deal with it before that article had come out.
And it's documented actually on the public disclosure website. Anyone can go look it up. It's right there documented. It says in there 7 weeks prior to 7 weeks, almost 2 months prior to any PDC complaints being filed, I'd already taken the steps to reimburse this out of my own integrity as a person and a human being. I was like, you know what, I didn't know. This is something I want to correct with my team. And so we made sure we did that. But because there were targeted attacks to try and discredit my campaign and discredit me as a candidate, on the day the ballots dropped, the Lynnwood Times article writes this owner himself, who I want the public to know out of just disclosure. Mario Lotmore is a former candidate for state senate. He ran as a Republican back in 2018. And so obviously me as a progressive, you know, candidate and stuff like that, we don't align on a lot of things. And I've been pretty much the basis of his attacks since the very beginning of my candidacy up until now. And there's evidence to prove this. But he dropped the article the day of the ballot saying Josh Binda under investigation up to $10,000 in campaign expenditures. And we're like, what? Like, what is this guy talking about? And at that point,
you'd already paid them off. Yeah. You'd identified them.
Already identified them, already taken care of. But the whole point was to try and to basically discredit my campaign. And it was a tactic used that they dropped on the day of the ballots to basically get voters to not vote for me. It's a campaign tactic that's known as far as campaigning goes back. You know, it's one of those things. And it's surprising because the Lynnwood Times owner himself, Mario Lotmore, was responsible for actually filing one of those PDC complaints against me.
Yeah, I've seen that in the paperwork.
Yeah, he filed the PDC complaint against me and then wrote about it in his own paper that he runs. And so like he controls the narrative. He's putting in the legwork to try and make sure that I'm getting in trouble for these things.
Do you remember if he had disclosed that he had filed one of the complaints as well?
He didn't disclose that in his own paper. It wasn't until the Everett Herald themselves called him out and said that he did it.
Okay.
And so the Everett Herald, which is the region paper that we have, there's an article that says Lynnwood publisher files complaint against Councilmember Binda. And so he didn't call it out himself. The Everett Herald called him out for doing that. And there's this stigma that's unethical to do as a journalist. You don't go out of your way to file a complaint against a candidate.
Or if you do, at least
Yeah,
disclose it.
at least you disclose it and then write about it in your own paper. Like that's just clear. In my opinion, that's unethical. Others can disagree or disagree. I think most would agree. But that's basically how that went down.
Was there anything that the PDC required you to do? How did you resolve it with them?
So basically, I was still able to get elected. I got elected in my position, but I was going into it with already this stigma from the Lynnwood Times. How to end up resolving with them? I ended up getting another PDC complaint for a F1 filing report, which is, I guess, every year people have to file their personal affairs, stuff like that. It's usually not a big deal. It's usually people can file this, on either the day before or whatever, or it's one of those things that happens, and so I filed mine late, got a PDC complaint against that. And I want to make this clear. Everything that has happened to me happens to about half the candidates all across Washington.
Okay.
It's happened about the same complaints that they're filing with me. And I want to make this very clear. The Lynnwood Times owner himself didn't write about the mayoral candidate in our same city, the same year I ran for office, had a bigger fine than me running for office. Not a single word in the Lynnwood Times.
Really?
Not a single word from anyone. About 6 out of the 7 council members we have currently have had PDC complaints and fines. Not a single thing written about them. But for some reason, everything I've done has been escalated, has been blown out there in proportion, has been tried to use as a way to weaponize against me as a newer, younger person running for office.
Are those other PDC complaints, do you believe they're in line with the type of complaint that you got?
The F1 filings, yes. Not as much campaign strategy, but like the misappropriating of how to spend, or not documenting spending money or certain things like that. I think our council person, Jim Smith, got a complaint, got a bigger fine than me the same year, and nothing was written on him. And so it's just been this theme of like I'm held at a completely different standard than anyone else. And I'm not just defending anything I've done. I'm not making it, but I'm letting people know the context and what's going on and why this is these are usually little minor errors that are usually handled and settled, and it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But because of what I've been able to do, because of the trajectory I've been on, the work I've been doing, I would say at this point I'm one of the more well-known politicians in our state, really. I'm at such a young age, and it's put a lot of target on my back with a lot of the stuff that I've been able to do and the impact I've been able to make in my community and beyond.
Sure.
So
let's roll forward a little bit. You're in office now. You've dealt with that first hurdle with the campaign spending side, which really, according to you, was resolved before you even got in, but you have to deal with it now in the public discourse. You get past that. You definitely operate a little bit differently than the rest of the city council. I've seen video of you in city council meeting. They've tried to call out words like decorum, which are very generalized things. And I got to say, I've watched the video. You definitely do act differently than the rest. You're a confident young guy. I think sometimes they felt like maybe you don't take the process seriously. What do you say to that?
In terms of the whole decorum, it's understanding, because there's been a lot of history where this certain decorum they're talking about has been used, and has been used in ways where people of color, people of certain different have been terrorized with the same type of decorum that they're talking about. And not saying that's what's going on here, but I would say I'm pretty professional. I go up there and I do my work for the community, but I'm not afraid to call out the crap, and I'm not afraid to tell them this is wrong. No, I think you're not taking these voices in consideration. You're not doing this. I don't think they're used to having someone being able to come up there and boldly fight for his community the way I'm willing to do. And I'm very transparent about it. I'm very open about it. I'm not one to say no, I'm just gonna let that go. No, I'm going to sit here and be like, no, I think this is wrong. And there's a lot of things they do. And to me, I call it performative politics. It's performed. They go up there, they'll have their little proclamations or reform, stuff like that. But in reality, none of the work that's really being needed to do to create these changes are being done. And I'm going up there, I'm like, I'm not here for the photo op.
Right. I'm
not here for the performative politics. I'm here to actually make a difference. I'm here to do the work that I said I was going to do. So when I go up there, and in terms of decorum, when they're saying these things, I'm like, no, that's wrong. And I'm like, I'll call it out to the public. This is not how it's supposed to be. We need to be doing things differently. And I'm me. I'm someone, like you said, I'm a very confident person. I'm someone I would say I'm unapologetically authentic. And I think that's why my constituents, the real people in the real world, resonate with politicians like me, because we're not here to play the fake political game. I'm actually here to be who I am as a person, a real person Not saying I'm a perfect person, a real person who wants to make the change that he wants to see.
So you believe the people who voted for you as you are, not you as a name, not you as a position, but you as the person you are.
They voted for me as the person I am and what I represent in the community and the voice I want to bring to the community. I door knocked like thousands of doors when I went, and they saw, my community members saw me face to face. I told all of them to their face what I want to do, who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish, you know. And I never once said I was a perfect person, but I said, this is Josh, and this is who I am, and this is what I want to accomplish. And it resonated with my community enough where I was able to win big time in the primary and a pretty good amount in the general election against another Democratic candidate at 21. And so I think that should show a lot of the kind of person I am and what people know. And I inspire a lot of people. People have been waiting for real people like me to get into office and truly advocate and not just stand there and keep the status quo of what's been upheld within the system to keep things the same. People want change. People want things that benefit the people and not the system, you know, and I'm a representation of that, and I'm unafraid to be that, and I'm unafraid to stand up for that any day.
So let's roll forward here. We're trying to pack 3 years in this, so I apologize for anybody.
No worries.
We've got some other longer form stuff we're going to get out that will fill in a lot of these gaps, but as we're trying to hit the heavy stuff this week. So you've been in office for a bit. You find out you've already been a public speaker in the past. You're finding out that this could be a lucrative career. And I want to also make clear, most people in city council do have a job outside of city council. Yeah,
it's a part-time job, like literally part-time. Like, we do not get paid enough to be there for it to be a full-time.
So there's an expectation that you are doing work outside of those chambers. As you find that you have an ability to continue your public speaking tour or public speaking work, you start a tour called the Love Conquers All Tour. And that tour is targeted towards elementary, junior high, and high school kids. You go around different schools getting, you know, in an assembly type form and get to speak to those kids as a motivational, inspirational speaker. The name, Love Conquers All, you love the name and decide to tattoo that on your body. And that then turns into this wild chapter in this whole thing where when you decide to put out a picture of this on your body, and you know, obviously even dressed, it's pretty clear you're an in-shape guy. You work out. The picture you took, I would never take, not because I have an issue with the picture. People just don't want to see that on me. But you're an in-shape guy, and so you get the tattoo on your body, and you have a picture that puts out. And you used a phrase that is common in pop culture. A lot of people have heard the phrase that says, "Tattoo my name so I know it's real." And that caption goes on the photograph and then goes on Instagram. And it was really meant, in what I believe, was to commemorate your time in this, and for you to tattoo the name so you know it's real. That's the interpretation that I had when I saw it. What happens next? You put that photograph out, and what happens next?
Well, I first want to start off with the whole thing. I want to start off with, you know, saying that the photo was just meant to be a harmless Instagram photo. I mean, I think people in my generation or whatever generation, like, a shirtless Instagram photo is it's really not that big a deal. But, you know, I want to make sure I'm sensitive, or at least being understanding of another perspective. And I want to apologize for if any confusion was created from that, you know, because it was just meant to be an Instagram photo dedicated to the tour. I want to make sure, as I'm obviously standing what I believe in. I want to make sure people understand that I could see another perspective as well. And I want to make sure people know, you know, since then, you know, I've been pretty sure, I've been having my shirt on everywhere I go, you know, and even when I sleep at night, I make sure I keep a shirt on, you know, I make sure I want people to know that, you know, I'm not shirtless anymore. I'm shirtful going forward. I've decided that.
I will say, when I saw it, I saw it before you and I talked about it. And first thing I saw was like, okay, bold move. And I thought, man, I wonder what the take's going to be from people who probably never voted for you in the first place. Not for the people it was speaking to, but for the people who are seeing it, because there seemed to be this take that somehow tattoo my name so I know it's real fits a sex trafficking narrative.
Oh God.
Which does not fit anything that you are.
It's from a Janae Aiko song. And people go look up the lyrics, and it's just like you said. It's just supposed to mean like I tattooed it on my on my bicep, so I know that what I'm doing, the purpose, what it is real to me.
This was not a call to action.
No,
this was a personal statement.
I'm pretty sure it couldn't be a call. It's illegal for anyone under age 18 to get a tattoo, so it's not a call to action. But I just want to also say that obviously, as I posted that photo, I didn't expect it to go national. You know, I didn't expect my abs to try, and it was just, you know, a photo from the side. It wasn't anything. If you go on my Instagram, and that's what I'm saying, people already know who I am. It's not like it's off brand. I've had shirtless photos on my Instagram since I was a teen. Like, it's on there. You can go on my page.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
If you scroll down, it's all been there.
It's
This
all
is nothing
been there.
new.
This is nothing new. But I can see how, and obviously, again, the Mar-a-Lot guy took it as a chance to take a shot at me, and create an article on his Lynnwood Times page. Josh Binda sexually promoting himself to minors for his love. I'm like, what? How'd you get that from a photo? Like, and it's just another tactic from that demographic of people to try and discredit the work I'm doing and who I am. You know, obviously, I was on this tour, I was getting a lot of notoriety from media. You know, it's all over statewide media from everywhere. Like, I mean, you saw the effects of how much it impacted students and faculty, and how much it really got for them to see something that looks like them, that talks like them, that understands what they're going through as a 23-year-old, and to put in their heads that, hey, love is a big factor in this. Like, we can win, you know, in society with being a good person. You can do these things the right way. And for them to see that was something that looks like them inspired them completely, more than people could ever imagine. And I have hundreds of messages and letters to this day that I still have to read for how much students were impacted by this. And so I think going forward, it's one of those tactics that were used. And then you had people on that side that didn't vote for me take that as an advantage politically to try and capture that. And then the next day, or their next council meeting, they showed up at our city council meetings with "Resign Binda Now" T-shirts and the Black Lives Matter logo. And I think, you would think he said public outcry. It wasn't a public outcry. They made it into an outcry. It was literally a group of like 6 or 7 of them that decided they were, and half of them weren't even from Lynnwood.
Right.
And so they just showed up to City Hall and created this public outcry and utilized the media to try and make this thing a bigger deal than it really was. And I think when it got up to Cairo News, when they posted about it, and you read through the comments, it blew up.
I've never seen a Cairo story get that much interaction.
It had over 500 comments and 90
on Facebook.
Yeah,
specifically.
on Facebook specifically. And I think 95% of them was like, why is this the thing? Why is this a big deal? This is a great, we support. 95% came in my defense. Yeah. And, you know, it was one of those things that it goes to show how dangerous some of these people that run the media are with their biases to try to push a narrative that's not real. Right. You know? And so it's really important that we have journalists that have integrity, that are willing to put real stories out there, not use their own personal opinions or whatever to create a narrative that was never supposed to be created. So I just want to acknowledge that's what this was. It was definitely targeted, and that it got all the way up to the national media for somehow. But like I said, I wanted to make sure that I stand firm in what I believe. It was an innocent Instagram photo, and you know that's all it's meant to be. And I want to acknowledge those who may have felt differently. That I do apologize for the confusion or anything.
Which I think stands out too, because the word I hear you use a lot is unapologetically me.
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, on this one, at least I understand where that's coming from.
Like I'm still acknowledging this is who I am. Like I don't, you know, the photo itself, I don't regret posting the photo, but
so would you have done it again if you had to do it over?
You know, it's not like I don't think it's one of those questions of would I have done again or not do it again, because
you're sleeping with your shirt on now. So there's been some changes.
I think it's one of those things that I definitely would think it through a lot more, maybe, you know, and say, you know what, maybe such and such. But in terms of my intentions or what I was want to do, I don't regret that one bit. And so, but I want to acknowledge that I see the other perspective, and I want to make sure that I can let them know. Because at the end of the day, I'm here to represent everyone. You know, I know that I feel like the media has tried to paint me as this controversial, like, you know, this really. And I'm really not a controversial person. I mean, Steve, you've known me for would I pay? Do I give off as someone that's? I feel like I'm very understanding. I try to take all perspectives and bring all perspectives to the table and just do my best to make a decision on things. Yeah. So I feel like the fact that this whole thing that, you know, controversial and this and that, I didn't create the controversy. It didn't come from me.
Sure.
It came from these media biases that people that they try to create and turn me into this controversial figure. Well, I'm just this 23-year-old just trying to make a difference and do the work in this community and just do it in a way that maybe people aren't used to.
Sure.
But that's what future's for. That's what change is for. And I think we just have to be more accepting and understanding of change as well, and not acknowledge we could work together and create the world we want to be in.
So let me get one more chapter in here before we transition into the investigation that the NAACP has since done. So before we get to that, there was one other chapter that has been another big issue. I think really the photo was like this flashpoint, this canon moment.
Yeah,
but
of course.
That then added more scrutiny, that then brought up recent travel that you had.
Oh, God.
So you went to Washington, D.C. You had asked the city council to pay for that trip. Now, a couple things to point out. There is a budget for city council people to travel with.
We all have a budget.
Right.
It's $2,500 biennium a year to use for conferences, for events, for things that we as council members want to do to make us better at our job and network with other council members, either in state, out of state, or whatsoever. So I didn't ask the city to pay for it. It's within my budget to do so. What had happened, I'll be very transparent about it, I'm very open and honest about anything that happened. What happened was I had contacted my city assistant and said, hey, this National League of Cities conference, I'm really interested in this. I'd love to go down there to D.C. and meet with other legislators and learn more about what it is being legislated from other legislators. And she's like, fine, that's great. I'm willing to do that. And so she registered me. She said, I'll register you. I'll get you signed up, stuff like that. I was like, perfect.
A city employee even went through the process of registering.
Was about to get to was going through the process of registering. And then what happened was an hour later, I get a phone call by our current council vice president, Shannon Sessions. And usually she never calls me, so I know if she called me, like, I don't know if this is going to be a good call. And so she calls me, and I go, hey, what's going on, Shannon? And I want to make this as a disclosure. Whether you're council president, vice president, doesn't matter. You are all elected officials. You all have the same equal level of power. The only thing the council president really has more responsibility to is setting the agenda for the next week. Other than that, there's no above power as a council leadership. And so she calls me and she goes, hey, I'm Josh. How's it going? I'm like, hey, it's going good. What's up? And then she goes, well, I just want to let you know you're not going to this conference in D.C. And I go, excuse me, what do you mean I'm not going to this conference in D.C.? She's like, well, I don't think you're a council in good standing, and so I don't think you should be going to this. And I was like, well, I don't think that's within your jurisdiction to tell me as an elected official where I can and can't go and what I can and can't do with my budget allowed funding. And so I was like, I'd like to talk to the city attorney about this because I don't think that's within your right to tell me that. And she goes, well, I'm telling you you can't go, and you're just ignorant to the rules. You're just ignorant as a person. Basically call me ignorant.
Did she use those words?
She used the word, she said, you're ignorant. And she's like, if you'd like to go, we can put this on the agenda at our following council meeting on Monday. But you don't want to do that because that'd be, quote unquote, embarrassing for me. Because she knows that she has the majority of the council's vote and they would vote it down. And I want to make this just for full disclosure. There's a whole other council member that's going on this trip. There's no approval process she has to go through. There's no voting. There's none of such. It's usually just a process. They go straight to the finance director. They approve it, such and such. But for some reason, I had to go through this approval process through the council and have it come on a meeting to talk about and all this. And for some reason, I had to go through all this process.
I want to clarify two things I've just heard you say. One, she denied it not because she felt that the trip was unjust. She said because you were in not good standing.
I'm like,
and
with
who?
who?
There's another council member going to the exact same thing. So there was no issue with the trip. What the trip was, somebody going to the trip, it was you not being in good standing. Had you been given documentation as to what not good standing
I don't know.
is?
There's no such thing as good standing for all. There's no such thing. I don't know what she meant. Maybe not good standing with her in the council. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But in terms of the public, I'm like,
there was no interdisciplinary. I don't even know that you can be disciplined as a city council member. You can be chastised and so on. But there's no interdisciplinary stuff.
No.
Anything you had was, the PDC, which have been handled. That does not involve that.
That does not involve council at all. And that's still not even something that could be chastised for anyways. But
and chastised, I said, they could just shame you. That's not a real, that's it.
And so she goes, and you can do that. So I go, well, I'm going to talk to the city attorney. And she goes, well, good luck. And ends the phone call. And so after that phone call ends, I go, you know, like, at that point, the registration window was gonna close for this conference. Like I was like, I don't have time to deal with all this. I'm just gonna go ahead. So I ended up paying for the trip up front myself. I didn't tell the council about it. I didn't tell anyone else about it because I don't have to. I'm an elected official for the people. She's not my boss. I'm not an employee. I'm here as an elected official, and I don't have to tell you where I'm going as a council member representing my community. And that's a known thing. And so I ended up registering on my own. Didn't tell the council about it. Didn't have to know about it. It's my business as a council member what I do and do not do. And so ended up registering. Ended up going to the National League of Cities. They didn't know I went. So I ended up going down there. And so what had happened, it was pretty cool actually. So originally there was supposed to be a speaker for the keynote speaker for the youth delegates. So there's youth delegates that travel to National League of Cities from all across the country. And originally the keynote speaker was supposed to be Congressman Maxwell Frost, who's a newly elected congressman from Florida, a first gen Zer, you know, it's a pretty big deal.
Very familiar with him. Yeah, he's a big name right now.
Pretty big name. And so he was supposed to be originally the keynote speaker. And, you know, like I said, a lot of the work I do is with youth and stuff like that. So I went to a couple of classes with the, you know, older seniors. But then I was like, you know what, I want to see what the youth are doing. And so I started going around the youth and being there and started talking to them like, man, you're cool. They knew me as the guy with the cool suit, you know, and the council member with the cool suit because I dress up.
You've dressed.
I do like to dress up. Yeah. And so I went down there. I started talking to them. They started realizing, man, like this guy's cool. Like, you know, he's nice seeing someone younger that looks like, you approachable, you know, not coming up there saying the same old things. And so after that, we get in a conversation and I meet up with like some of the people that helped organize it, like the youth organizers, and they're talking and they're having conversations like, man, we don't know if Maxwell Frost is going to show up. You know, we've emailed him, we've talked to him, and we don't know if he's going to be available. He hasn't responded. And so, you know, me being there and I was already talking to some of them and stuff like that, I was like, hey, like, you know, if they're like, hey, like, are you, you know, you look like a pretty young, I was like, yeah, I'm a Gen Z politician just like him. And quite frankly, I actually run my own public speak. So I public speak, I actually do this for a living. So, you know, I was like, if Maxwell Frost doesn't show up, they say, hey, if he doesn't show up, would you be willing to come in and replace him as the keynote speaker for the National League of Cities for the youth closing delegation? I was like, I'd love to. And so so he ended up not showing up, and so they ended up using me as a replacement. And I want to put this in just a background information. Up until I had spoken, there's older politicians and people going up there and speaking. The kids were really checked out. They weren't paying attention. They were on their phones. They're just kind of, you know, the same old boring. And I'm sitting in the crowd and I'm observing this. I'm like, okay, I want to take a different angle than what these guys are doing.
I've seen you come take the mic at events like that where it's somebody older and then you jump on. It's a wild thing to watch.
So, yeah, and so I was like, I got to take a different angle. So I go up there and I start talking to these kids. I was like, you know what? Not everyone in this room is going to be a politician. Not everyone's going to be such and such. But you need to know that as a young person, it's important to find out who you are, be unapologetic that, and go after your dreams, and don't let anyone tell you you can't do this. You know, and I told them about my backstory. I told them where I come from. I told them all the trials and tribulations I've dealt with as a young person, how it's important to stay true to your youth, to understand that's your power and not your disadvantage. You know, and I just spoke a lot of things into their heart that resonated. And they were like, yeah. They're like, go, Josh. Like, yeah. And they didn't even know who I was. And so as I'm speaking down there, stuff like that, all of a sudden at the end, like I was the only person. They got up and gave a standing ovation. Like they were clapping. They were super excited. I got photos with them all afterwards. And then the National Leagues of Cities Twitter pages themselves actually posted me on their page. They got my age wrong and they misspelled my name, but they posted me on their page for coming down there and speaking to the youth. And I don't think my council didn't find out until our other council member, I guess, saw me at this conference, and she ended up reporting back to our council leadership that I was at this conference.
But you could go to it. You didn't, even if you weren't part of city council, you could still have gone.
You could still have gone if not part of city council.
I could have gone.
Yeah, you could have gone.
If I wanted to pay for the ticket and do all the stuff, I could have gone. You just so happened to have gone.
But I could have gone as it was still within my right to go as a council member.
Yeah.
Because that's just a right you have as a council member. And so she didn't know. I guess one of our council members had reported back to her that stuff like that, and then they seen me on the National League of Cities page. And so when I got back, I could tell that probably pissed them off.
And you'd already paid. It's not like you'd grab the card out of the desk. No. You know, you'd paid.
I paid for it up front myself. And so I came back to our city council next meeting, and so they had an agenda to talk about the National League of Cities. And the fact is they actually kept me off the agenda. They only put our other council member on the agenda to talk about it for some reason. They didn't want me to come and talk about my experience. And so as I go on there and as I come back to our city council next meeting, I made a public request. I said, hey, after finding out they had publicly funded our other council member, there was no approval process or nothing. I said, hey, I would like to request a reimbursement for my campaign not for my campaign. I'd like to request a reimbursement for my expenditures going down to DC. This is within my budget to do. And the only reason I didn't go through the full process was because our council president tried to block me in the process of it. And not knowing that's within my right to go and do this, I just went and did it on my own. And so now I'm publicly coming to request this reimbursement. And so what happened with that, then our council president started putting out lies and slander, saying I wasn't a keynote speaker at the National League of Cities, that I was going to this trip to DC for my own selfish gain and purpose, and that I was going there for myself and trying to come back and request taxpayer dollars, which is, first of all, it's all taxpayer dollars. Right. But I was going back and requesting taxpayer dollars to front my own personal trip to DC when this was within my right as a council member to go as a council member and do. And she started putting out all these lies, and then she started grasping onto the local media, reaching out. We found out through the NAACP investigation, she started reaching out to these personal local media to spread this misinformation. It got all the way to Cairo News, and before you know it, they're posting these stories. Josh Binda goes on unapproved trip that, first of all, didn't need approval. Yeah. Unapproved trip to DC and coming back requesting taxpayer dollars. And so after that, I sat down with our mayor and I sat down with our city staff, and we went through our travel policy to find out if I need to go through any approval process. And as we went through, in our travel policy, it said to each council member's own discretion, they go to wherever conferences, wherever such and such they want, and anything that they choose to their own discretion, which means there's no approval process. And she made that up. And I want to put this out there as a fact. The other council member that actually went was actually over budget for her trip that she went down there.
And still got paid?
And still got paid to go.
Okay.
She was actually, I was under budget, and they tried not to fund me. And so with that information and stuff like that, we found out I didn't need an approval process. And then the following week, we had a council meeting where 2 of our youth delegates that were there from across the country came in and testified, because our council president put this on the agenda to talk about my reimbursement expenditures, because she didn't want it to happen, even knowing that fact. And so 2 of the youth delegates came and testified and said, hey, Josh was the keynote speaker here at National League of Cities. He was inspirational. The students loved him. We don't know why you guys are doing this and trying to discredit him and do all of that. From across the country, came in and testified at our council meeting. It's on Zoom. People could go look this up. It's public record. That's what I'm saying. Everything I'm saying. And I'll
go through with everybody too. There is the NAACP's deal with. There is a QR code, and you can get to all.
It's all public record. So everything I'm saying, it's the truth. And then and then also our city staff, our city attorney even said, hey, look, according to our travel policy, this is within every single right of his right to go on this trip to do this and that. And so all the facts were brought up there, that I went there and attended the classes, that I spoke at the youth delegate session, that was in my right. All the facts were brought up to the table. And even then, our council president made a motion to in front of the entire public, stuff like that, to the council, and said, I would still like to make a motion that is the opinion of the council that Josh Binda's reimbursement be.
He just wants it on record because an opinion doesn't even. That's not a ruling.
It's
that's
not
an opinion.
It's
a documented opinion.
An opinion of the council that Josh Binda's reimbursement be rejected.
Okay.
It got passed in a 5-2 vote, which is completely discriminatory. They basically were trying to influence the finance director.
So in light of the rules, saying that they just wanted to be noted on record that think it should not follow the rules.
They basically were publicly discriminating against me. And I said this out of me. I was like, this is performative. This is discriminative. Can we not do this because this is wrong? You guys know this is wrong. You guys say you follow by these rules, but then when it comes to me, for some reason, you're trying to hold me at a completely different standard. I was like, the city's watching this. I said this publicly on our meeting. This is discriminatory. And even with that, just because she didn't want to be proven wrong, she didn't want to, she made it a fact that we are, basically try to bully me and say, what are you going to do? You know? And that's after that. And I want to make this publicly disclosed as well, that I ended up still getting reimbursed. So
that was going to be my next thing. So they put out their opinion just so it was on the docket. And as per the guidelines, as per the rules, you were reimbursed.
I was reimbursed because it was within my right.
Let's also, before we move to the next topic, so there was been this that you were or were not the keynote speaker. This is an insinuation that you were not, which you were. It's documented. The other city council member who went and was reimbursed or paid for up front, were they the speaker of anything?
No, she wasn't speaking. She just went.
So it really doesn't even matter.
No.
That's a secondary thing, just another thing to discredit. Because even if you didn't speak, you should have been reimbursed.
Exactly. And so it's all mumbo jumbo. You know what I'm saying? And they know how to say things in their articles to try and twist into it. But no, it didn't even matter in the grand scheme of things. And that's after that was when the NAACP got involved.
Yeah, and so I wanted to outline kind of these moments that end up being these, well, it's because of this, it's because of that, these specific things that then they want to point out. During this time frame, the NAACP gets involved, and they decide to launch an investigation in your place to start getting to the bottom of what is really going on here. This has gone on for some time. The NAACP was kind of quiet during a lot of this. It came out that they were working with you, but they weren't making much in the way of public statements. Then comes a press conference, which I've been to many press conferences. I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah.
I haven't been to many quite like that.
Yeah, it was a unique experience.
It was put out as that they were going to show their findings. And so there was a backdrop. I'm sure at this point for those watching, you've probably seen some footage of that the day I was there. And a number of members come up. And so generally when I've been to these types of conferences, what happens is they break out slides and they go, here's what we have here, here's what we have there. What they did was they gave us all a handout with a QR code and a basic breakdown and said, hey, everything's here. Basically, we brought receipts. They don't really walk through a lot of what's in there, and then things get contentious.
I think Janice in the beginning did say a couple of things when she went out there and spoke.
Janice was great. Janice
said a couple of things that they found as well. I think the reason they took the reason they took their approach, I think they just were frustrated that the media was so quick to blast out all this misinformation about me below there, but as journalists weren't willing to actually do the research themselves. So I think they were frustrated, and there's they want to do the research.
I think we're going to try and post some of that footage that was captured that day so people can hear it, because I know a lot of the media stations, and I did get the sense that when media would ask a question, there was pushback, but I think it became mutual pushback both ways, right? They're frustrated because we're there at a press conference. We can't pull this up and be able to listen at the same time, and we don't have anything to specifically speak about, but then it devolves from there. Since then, I would have expected that by the time they then go to public, they put out their pieces, that they would have gone through it. Some of them went so far as to just mock it and say, well, I'm not even going to look this up. I'm just going to tell you what the press conference was like and leave it at that. Since then, I've gotten a chance to go through a lot of this, and there's a ton. We're going to post the QR code so other people can go and look as well.
Yeah.
Can you walk through, in your words, I'd like you to set what is in here, say what is in here, and what are people going to expect to find? Because ultimately, what it comes down to is the NAACP believes that that you have been targeted.
Oh yeah,
and
plotted against.
And it appears to be race-based, race-oriented. That race has played a part, and if not, I think it's quite a coincidence.
And I want to make sure race is definitely a big part of it, but I think it's a bigger picture. It's intersectionality. I think I kind of explained it. It's so many things. Race is a factor. It's what I represent.
Right.
It's my age. It's my style, my tone. They knew by me getting into this council all that what that represents. Coming in there, and most people are just threatened by change. Especially when the people, you'd be surprised how many of these elected officials are literally in these positions, not because they want to make a difference, they want to keep things exactly the same for their communities where their good old buddies club benefit, and they want to keep things running exactly the way it is.
And your pushback has been, hey, I may not be like you or operate like you, but that's why I was voted in.
That's why I was voted in.
I'm responsible. It is up to me to uphold what I was voted in as.
And so what people are going to find in that documentation, I think we didn't hit this point earlier.
Yeah.
I filmed a video on an Instagram video about the Love Conquers All tour, basically announcing to the students like, hey, I'm super excited about this. I'm getting ready to come to speak to your school. It's going to be fun. And we talk about so much how we want youth engagement, we want to get the youth involved, such and such. So this is my way of getting the youth excited about something that was coming to this. It was a mandatory MLK assembly. Yeah. This wasn't like, there's no tickets, there's no things to sell. It was just an announcement video to the students. So what I found out was that my council leadership and such, because I'd filmed this video in city chambers, had meetings with our city attorneys and stuff like that about if I had violated any rules or any regulations because of this. And I wasn't part of these meetings. I didn't know about them. And so what I found out was, I guess our city attorney said that I didn't violate any state laws. I didn't violate any city rules. But the only thing in question would be, I guess our Lynnwood Municipal Code, 2.94, which you can't use city property or city thing for personal benefit or gain, whatever. She said you could do that, but that's still, you have to find what ways why he did that. And so I guess my council took that and ran with it. And so what they did was, because I filmed this Instagram video and because I was getting paid as a public speaker to speak at the school tour, to speak at the school tour all across the state, which I want to put out there, I actually didn't even want to get paid for some of these schools. They said, Josh, what you're doing is valuable. We want to pay you for coming here.
They'd already budgeted it.
They already budgeted and everything. I wasn't, it's not like I was like, hey, I need this amount, this. No. These schools wanted to pay me for the work I was doing. And because if they weren't going to pay, they were going to pay another public speaker to do it anyways. This wasn't like I was this is the process of being a public speaker and the work I was already doing years before I was elected. And so my council leadership, they had a meeting. They brought in all their local right-wing media, the Lynnwood Times, obviously, and their journalists from Ever Herald. And they made sure that on the dais, they said they'd like to take me up for investigation with the ethics committee to see if I violated any codes or stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, the Lynnwood Times, Ever Herald, Josh Binda under investigation with the ethics board for potentially violating his oath of office. This is just blow out of proportion, exaggeration again. Well, first of all, it's not even a big deal. And so second of all, it was an Instagram video to announcing to kids. They made it sound like I was like violating my...
You'd already booked these appearances.
Yeah,
It's been your stand as well.
I
You were not booked. This was not to book. They had been booked. This is post-promo.
These were already gigs and stuff like that.
Negotiations were done. Contracts were signed.
Before I even spoke there. And the only school that wasn't was Edmond's School, but it was in the contract because I already had a verbal agreement with them before the video.
So that had already been negotiated.
That had already been negotiated and done. And it was just signed after the video, but it was already set in stone and it's documented in there. So I didn't profit off of this video. I didn't make any, it was
that
already,
wasn't the intent.
No, that wasn't the intent. It was all just to announce to the kids. And if I didn't make this video, none of this would have even been a big deal. Right. If I didn't film this.
And you would have done the same amount of
tours, same amount of money. But because I filmed the Instagram video in City Hall, they took it and ran with it. And so this ethics board, this ethics committee, which ended up being that there was a settlement between me and the city, basically saying, okay, he shouldn't have. And they said I used my city email and cities for my own to get these tours, whatever, stuff like that. What happened was the schools reached out to me on my city email.
Yeah, I want to be clear on that because you mentioned this before. Yeah. So you didn't solicit out. People wanted to contact you, maybe didn't know how, Googled you, and you get
on my city email.
That's how that started.
And they reached out to me and I responded on my city email. And so I wasn't aware that there's going to be this whole construction. Oh, you can't use your city email.
Did you have another email address set up that they didn't know about?
No, not that time. And so so then once I found out this was a thing, I created one. I was like, okay, and now I had a referral. I was like, hey, I can't. Now that I know that, I'm like, okay, now if they're going to reach out to my city email, I'm just going to, refer them to my business email. Say, hey, no, you have to go reach out. I didn't know that by responding on my city email, that's me using city. And I want to make this very clear. They all do it. They all use their city emails for stuff but they were just trying to find ways to make it seem like I was doing it with some wrong intent.
Because your belief is you're held to a different and higher standard.
It's not that it's the truth. It's just what it is, And I knew as a young black person going to this position that this is what it's going to be, but I didn't know it was going to get weaponized the way it did, And so,
what comes out of this then? What does that know?
And that's where I'm going to is at this committee. And so, what you're gonna find in there is actually the day I got elected to office, our council president Shannon Sessions sent an email to all staff members and all elected officials, and the subject says Josh Binda, and in the email it says, now that we know the results of this race, we need to start the process of our ethics board. So this ethics board that they ended up weaponizing against me later down the line wasn't even created until the day I got elected. And it was set up to use and weaponize against me once I got into office.
So before all of these other things happened, just you getting elected was let's form this board.
Yeah, we got the day I got elected, our council president sent an email to all staff, and it's all in there.
So let's be clear. There is an actual copy of this email that the NAACP has collected, date stamp that says that
2021
that people can see.
It's in 2021 because the NAACP this investigation requested all public records of all emails from all council members for the last 2 years, because they felt like there was documents in there that would show that these people have been targeting and using them and trying to get me the way they were. And it showed the day I got elected, the day they found, they was even saying, she was saying, yeah, now that we know that Josh Binda is coming in here, we need to start this process, or our ethics board, more concerning information been brought up. And so they met up with our city attorney, and they had a executive session to talk with our city attorney about this as well. And so they were getting ready to set this whole ethics board that didn't even exist until I got elected. And then they ended up weaponizing that same ethics board that they made and they set up in retaliation to me getting into office, and weaponized against me going forward.
So what you laid out is that even the city's attorney was involved in this. Why doesn't that person weigh in and say, hey, we're going to set a precedent here that we haven't had in the past, maybe we shouldn't do this? What's your thought on that? Why would the legal resources the city has go along with this plan?
Well, one, I don't think they expected this to actually come out. I don't think none of them, because to do what the NAACP did takes resources, and they knew I didn't have the resources to it costs money to request this amount of public record, and they knew I didn't have the resources to do that on my own. And so, one, I think I have to do it, and two, I don't think they thought. This is me just trying to maybe give her the benefit of the doubt. I don't think she thought that this was their plan and what they were gonna do down the line. Maybe she thought this is just, they just want to set this up just so we have everything set up. I don't think she thought that this was really just a targeted plot to set Josh up to try and weaponize against him, which is what they did. And so, and at that point, obviously she's in it, and I don't think they're going to come out and say, oh, by the way, this is what they did. This is what they set up for you, Josh, 2 years ago. No, I don't think she's going to come. I think once we did our research, did it on our own. And the good thing is in that email chain, nobody else responded. So I'm assuming they probably had phone calls, stuff like that. They probably were. That's the thing.
So there was no written response back.
No written response back.
So for them to continue that conversation, they would have had to go offline to continue.
Which is why they had an executive session, which they are not allowed to have an executive session. And so, but I think the other people were smart enough to know not to put that in writing. But I think they're so used to getting away with what they got. She's so used to it that she thought that she could just blatantly put that on email and public record for people to see.
Sure.
And so now that's what the NAACP, which showed that there was a target and construed to try and basically weaponize all these things against me from the very beginning.
Sure.
They were never accepting me coming in there. They never wanted me to come in there. I was the outsider coming in, and they all knew it. And so that's one thing you'll find in there. Another thing you'll find in there is her, our council president, reaching out to these media outlets, having conversations, and spreading this misinformation about me going on this unapproved trip, and this and that. And she's reaching out to them and giving them.
Is she proactively reaching out?
I don't
Leave
know
that out.
proactive
Don't
or
worry
not,
about
but
it. Okay.
she was there was a reach out between them. That's in there as well. And then even our mayor in the email was like, can we tone this down to, CM Binda's discussion about it? Because she brought the agenda about my discussion of my reimbursement and tried to say my unapproved trip and this and that. And our mayor had her tone it down because she already felt like it was too attacking towards me. And so there's that in there. And then there's just a lot of, I'm trying to think what other details people could find in there. Our travel policies in there. The settlement is in there that shows that this was unintentional and this and that. Also,
so you've really brought all receipts then.
Oh yeah, we brought, and there's the crazy thing about this is the day of the NAACP press conference, we got a whole another batch of emails from Shannon. So we didn't even get her full emails yet. We just got it the day of the press conference, so we didn't get a chance to go through that, which is why that was the preliminary.
Is that adding to this file?
Adding to that.
So this is growing.
Yeah, that's preliminary.
Okay.
And so there's that, on there. There's more documents and details, and you have to scroll down to the bottom of it's on the NAACP website with that QR code. And it's a OneDrive with all these emails in there and all this stuff in there, and you can go through and see all the details yourself, and what they did and the conversations that was being had with me not being in that chain, and other details as well, But yeah, and then there's another point that I'm going to be hitting that's this wasn't in the investigation, but I've even come to find out this to light, and I think I just brought up to you before this even happened, but this is more evidence that currently there's this committee to recall me.
Yes.
The committee called Josh Binda, which is led by a man named Dio Bushiegas, right? And check this out. He is also a former employee of the Lynnwood Times. And so he worked for the Lynnwood Times.
Who's
And
funding this? Where are they getting their money? Because
So-
they came out of nowhere.
yeah, so he's a former employee of Lynnwood Times, and check this. I found out he actually ran for the city of Lynnwood Council back in 2019 and got 8% of the vote.
Okay.
And so he ran for office, the same city, the same thing I'm doing right now. A few years ago, lost. Now he's the chair of this recall committee to recall me. What do you think his purpose is? They want to try and get me out of the seat so he can get appointed to it.
Got it.
So it's all construction, and he's a former employee of the Lynnwood Times, the same one that's been putting out all this misinformation, the articles and stuff like that. So there is just this huge collusion, and so where they're getting this funding from, I actually did some digging into their funding and stuff like that, and this even proves more what's happening here in the city, which is I think it's disgusting. I think it's corrupt. Currently, our current council vice president, Juliet Altamirano Crosby, her husband and treasurer for a campaign, has recently donated to their campaign to recall me out of office, and they're accounting for about a third of their funding
That's a
right now.
significant amount.
It's completely gross, and shows how much more our council leadership is construing and conspiring with these recall people to try and unseat the youngest person on their council. It's gross. And honestly, I'm disappointed from coming from another BIPOC candidate, but there's even history there with her. But it just goes to show how much these people, they do not like the fact that I'm holding the seat that I am.
Are you releasing documents on that claim too?
And that I will release documents, and that's public records where you can go on the Public Disclosure Commission and look up the recall committee to Josh Binda and see Patrick Crosby as their donor.
We'll get a copy of
and
that.
stuff like
then,
that.
put
Get a
out
copy
there.
of that,
Okay.
put it out there. Like everything I'm saying, there's documents to prove this.
So
And so it's a whole conspiracy that's happening with council members, with media, with these people, because they just don't like the fact that I'm on the council, and they've been trying to do this for a while.
So now you got the NAACP involved, this big investigation. What's the end goal here? What are you trying to do? What's resolution to you?
My resolution one is, well, first of all, I never wanted it to even get to this point. I just want to come here and do my job. I just want to do my job and make the difference in the community and do what I want to do. And these people have been interfering with that. They've been getting in the way. Instead of working together, they've been creating this division, and so my end goal is for one, accountability, because the slandering, the misinformation, all that's been put out there, it's been disgusting to see, and I think it just goes to show that these people in these positions of power think they can do this to anyone. And if I wasn't the strong person that I am, who knows, this could have ran me out of office, And there are people that are inspired by me, that look up to people like me, that want to see this, and young people that want to see this. And when we're seeing someone like me get in there and being completely slandered the way I have been, it's discouraging to them, And so my end goal is, I want there to be accountability. I want them to know that you're not going to get away with this, And I'm glad that's got the attention that it has now, and I want them to know that I think at the end of the day, you're either with us in our cause to make a difference and create the society we want to see, or you can step aside, get out the way, and let the next generation create the world we want to live in.
So for people who are watching this who want to support you and support your cause and support this process you're going through, how can they support you?
Thank you so much, Steve, for that. So I have a committee right now that's been created. It's called Retain Josh Binda. So you can go on retainjoshbinda.com. Right now we're accepting donations for our campaign to help me fundraise, just in case this recall effort does reach a ballot. And so right now we're about halfway through our goal of fundraising, and so any amount that people could donate. As I said, I ran a very grassroots campaign. I'm still a young person as well, and so any funding would be helpful towards this cause to help us make sure that I could send out flyers, put out yard signs, and do things to make sure that I retain my seat here in Lynnwood, Washington. And all that information is on my website as well, retainjosh.com. And it's also going to be my links on my Instagram. Feel free to follow my Instagram at Josh Binda. And my TikTok as well is Councilman_Binda. And both of those donation links are on there as well.
Summarize, you got the majority of the city council seemingly not wanting you there. You've got finance issues with the campaign that you say are in the past. You've already paid your fines, no longer a big deal. Accusations of sexualizing a tour that was designed and presented to school-age children. The NAACP now has come to your aid. the realization the NAACP's also found out, and it sounds like the NAACP has discovered that one of the other council members has contributed upwards of a third of the total recall campaign budget. All that going on. What's next for you? What do you do? If you get past all of this, with all that going on, if you get past all of this and manage to make it through this recall campaign, what's next for you? What are you going to do? So, we've gone through a lot in this last hour, and you've answered most all my questions, and we acknowledge that it seems like the majority of your own city council peers don't want you there. The NAACP shows that they've discovered a lot of evidence showing that. There is this recall campaign that apparently one of them's even been funding upwards of a third of. A segment of the public has accused you of sexualizing a tour that you've done that was designed around school-age children. All this going on, if you make it past this recall, what's next for you? What do you plan to do with the rest of your time there? What do you plan to do afterwards?
I think at the end of the day, what's next is whatever is to come. I think I've tried my best to be someone. I don't ever want to be considered a career politician or have these super ambiguous goals out there, because I think that takes away the authenticity of why I do what I do. Right now I'm doing what I'm doing because I want to represent my community. I want to make the biggest impact and then make the biggest difference. And at the end of the day, whether that's a city council member, whether that's a president, the impact itself is just as powerful no matter what position I'm at. And so I think what comes with it is what's next is I'm going to continue to being unapologetically me, baby. I'm going to continue, doing the work that I'm doing. Whatever title that looks like, whatever position that looks like, that I think that's the minuscule factor. I represent the impact and the change, and that's not going away. That's going to be here. And so I'm ready to take that on wherever that looks like and continue doing the work I'm doing, whether it's in the city of Lynnwood or beyond. I'm not going to set, a standard or of saying this is where I want to go, because I want it to be organic, because the work I'm doing is organic and represents that. And I said this in an interview, I'm going to say it here. I just want to urge you guys to, just remember that name, Josh Binda, because you're going to be hearing about it for a long time with the things we're going to be doing and the change we're going to be bringing. And, doing this type of work, I feel like being this type of person I am, for change to happen, it takes guts, I think it takes strength, and it takes no fear. And I like to say, thank God I got all three. So I'm ready for it.
That's the Josh Binda I know. Thank you for coming out here and talking.
Yeah.